Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday. I thought it was Thursday. I'm like wishing days away. I'm like all blending together, Paul. We have Paul Redding, who's representing Compliancy Group today. For anyone in the tech/MSP circles, you may have heard of Compliancy Group, or maybe Paul's been around for a while. Maybe you know Paul. So, Paul, where are you at today, man?
I'm in Memphis, or just outside.
Right on.
I've been home since I last saw you in San Antonio, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like that was like 2 years ago.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's a whole different world ago. If you had asked me what I was going to be doing, with the rest of the year back in February, I'd have said, I'm going to fly 46 weeks this year and work out of a hotel. So as you can see, the overlook is as close as I can get to normal.
Yeah, I see it. I got it. I mean, were you down in the neck of the woods where there was, right before COVID hit, there was like tornadoes and there's a little bit of like, was that by you or is that more towards Tennessee?
So we're in West Tennessee, right on like the Arkansas Mississippi border. Most of that was between here and Nashville. We get pretty extreme weather, but Memphis has been historically pretty lucky. We're at the widest part of the Mississippi River, so a lot of that weather kind of goes around us and then converges on the poor folks on the other side of the state.
Gotcha. So you actually didn't get as really badly hit by that. I mean, like that was a double whammy, right? For the people who were like literally decimated by that. And then all of a sudden now we're at home. That was
stay home, but you don't have a house.
Yeah, I was wondering how that worked out, right? Probably not real comfortable for people in that position.
No, it was pretty rough.
So I assume down in Memphis, weather's been fairly good this whole time.
Man, this has been the nicest spring I can remember in my adult life. By now, it should be 90 plus degrees, and it has been absolutely gorgeous. That is one thing I cannot complain about at all.
Gotcha. So how's it? How have you been dealing with lockdown time? I mean, is your state back open? Give us an idea of what the surroundings are.
Yeah, we opened with that first wave of states that kind of, threw caution to the wind and ran out. I have been probably a little bit more cautious than a lot of people in the surrounding areas. Both my wife and I have older folks in our family. But in general, it has not been, nearly as bad as it has for my counterparts in New York. Compliancy Group, as you know, is a New York based company. So we're on like opposite sides of the world of this. I mean, little kids, I live on a lake. It's been vacation on the weekends and get used to working from this noisy home where nobody makes my bed for me every day. That's been one of my biggest challenges, is getting used to the idea. I go downstairs and there's no buffet and nobody makes the bed while I work.
Yeah, you're part of the travel idea where you'd rather be in the Courtyard Marriott than in your own bed.
Yes, most definitely. I am most comfortable at Marriott or Hilton.
All right. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Events back this year or now?
I think we're going to see some happen. Yes. I think that there's going to be, I believe that they're probably going to go through with exchange in August. I think that's probably going to happen, and there'll be some smaller face-to-face stuff before the end of the year. Sadie from your team and I were discussing earlier. The question is who's going to show up and what attendance is going to be like. Are we all going to be standing around in masks? I don't know.
I was going to say, what's your gut on that? People got to, venture out, get on planes, and get back going again? I mean, we're talking like, I think the event that you just mentioned is like in 2 months from now.
Yeah, it is. And so I think what's going to happen is I think travel is going to suck worse than people realize. The experience itself may be pretty miserable. So I think you'll have a couple of events happen that have decent attendance and a few with really poor attendance behind them. I'm concerned that we see everybody goes out once and goes, oh God, I don't want to do this right now. So I'll admit I have some serious concerns from my side, but given my role and kind of director of the team, I will be the one to let's say.
Gotcha. Paul, I think I don't know if your connection's a little bit shaky, but Can you hear me?
Uh, yeah, I hear you fine. Is my video all choppy now?
Yeah, it's a little bit choppy. I think you might actually even be frozen, but we're gonna see if we can continue riding with the audio, see if it clears up.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. So how's New York doing? I mean, they're on Long Island, right? So they're probably still under lockdown
Yeah.
until August, probably.
Yeah, well into the middle of the year. We've been very lucky. We haven't had anybody on our team actually contract COVID or anything. We unfortunately we have had a few members of our team lose family members through this thing. So it's New York, man. It's the epicenter of what's been pretty nightmarish. But they're hanging in there. The organization is going strong, and New York is a very resilient place, man. These people have been through a lot over the years and know how to fight.
Yeah, definitely feel bad for him though, right? I mean, between 9/11, between the stock market crash in '08, and between this, I mean, they just always are in the middle of that, the whole just jam.
And I can't imagine Manhattan without restaurants and nightlife, and you know what I mean? Like the idea that you can't go out to dinner in Manhattan also just blows my mind.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, basically, yeah, if the streets are empty, you're wondering what's going on over there. So totally get it. So let me ask you, I'm going to ask some targeted questions, right? And I'm sure you've gotten all of these, but hey, why not? So the government came out and said they wanted to relax HIPAA constraints to facilitate teleworking. And then like everybody went out to the street and said, oh, well, we don't have to worry about HIPAA. Rock on. Is that real? Is that true? Or is that like, is that misunderstood? I'm confused.
We almost have kind of a prequel to some of the presentation we've been doing recently, which is what changed about HIPAA during COVID. Nobody froze HIPAA. Nobody suspended anything at all. What they actually did, a couple of things really don't matter to, let's say, the channel community as a whole. It was like about Medicare cost sharing. So it makes it easier to use doctors outside your plan. It makes it easier to use doctors outside your geographic region. And I, as let's call it the IT section, don't care about. Where it was interesting is that they did relax the requirement for you to have a business associate agreement on file with whatever telehealth platform you use, right? So all of a sudden, I'll pick on the one we're using today, Zoom has a HIPAA compliant version and they have a non-HIPAA compliant version. Suddenly, you could choose to do a telehealth session on the non-HIPAA compliant version. Sounds great. Sounds like it makes everything easier for everybody. But man, the reality is can and should are two wildly different things, right?
I mean,
So instead,
people could be using something just as simple as FaceTime. I mean, they could be using
they are.
Skype. I mean, it's all over the map, right?
They are, and they are. And if you look at it, what's going to happen right now? Okay, you're in a bubble where you don't get executed for this, and maybe $1 million breaches. It's really going to be like after this is over, you're going to see so much data stolen and so many breaches reported that we're all going to be at a certain point, like they're going to come back with massive enforcement around what's happened. And think about it. You're a doctor. There's this poor soul in San Francisco that was, it doesn't have a doctor version. That ends up on YouTube and all his neighbors watch him talking self-harm thoughts and God knows what, right? So whether or not that doctor is going to be fined millions of bucks, he's lost at least that and probably many of his patients.
So let me rewind here. So this whole relaxed, push out of telehealth requirements. That's it, right? So let's talk about that for a second. That started when, and when do you suspect that that's going to end? Like, is there a defined deadline to flipping back to the switch or what?
No, that's a great question, George. It was announced almost with no fanfare, and it's not like anybody got an email telling you this happened, right? The first time we even became aware of it is the president goes on the news and says this has taken place. So of course, we contact HHS, we get clearance. You're going to find data for they close it out tomorrow, and when we do the announcement about as undercover. Like, hey, look, by the way, all that's done. You need to get back to being compliant. Will not be some massive thing where every doctor in the world is contacted and told, if you continue doing this tomorrow, you're subject to $1 million fine. It's one of the reasons we're encouraging people not to do this. Again, can and should being two different things. It's our take. You need to use a HIPAA compliant platform, period, because A, the risk to yourself, and B, who's monitoring this? Today it's fine. Tomorrow you're subject to $1 million fine. It's not worth the risk.
So basically, everybody's got to keep track. Either follow social media, follow HSA. Like, there's gotta at some point there's going to be a finality to this. We don't know when. Maybe for the end of the year, maybe next year. I don't know. And they really just need to be up on it. Otherwise, it could be caught with their pants down.
Correct. And again, using it today is, maybe tomorrow they change the law. You're at a little risk. If you have a breach tomorrow, and they've rolled the law back 24 hours before, it's not just the breach you're going to be fined for. Now it's the platform you weren't supposed to be using and the lack of a business associate agreement. Didn't meet it yesterday. Today we're back to a place where it's critical.
Okay, so going back to the original question I put out there, the misnomer, right? Hey, HIPAA's on hold. Wild, Wild West. We'll come back to you later. Really, it was a very narrow thing that we're talking about here. The rest of the stuff that usually applies, right? Encryption and BAAs and staff training and secure password policies and all that other good, like, there's multiple pieces. I'm not the expert here, you are, but all the other stuff that comes with HIPAA, that never got shut off.
No, it never will. It never will. We've seen this. This isn't the first time it's happened, George. If you back up many events, Katrina as an example, where they relaxed lots of HIPAA laws because you had so many people flooding hospitals. And who has not. So can you release patient names to the state if they test positive for COVID? These requirements and these responsibilities have changed, and it's a temporary thing. But to your point, there are some core pieces of the HIPAA puzzle, if you will. There's some core values: protect the data, protect the session, hold privacy sacrosanct. It's binary. It's on. It's not off.
Okay, so all of these ground rules, right? Hey, you need to be able to protect the data, protect the session, keep patient private, sessions private, right? That whole, confidentiality thing. So let me ask you this question. What about, BAAs don't last forever, right? So what happens when, and then the other concern is that what happens when the platform that you got a BAA for decides to put out something quick, right, to cover the COVID situation, and maybe you didn't realize that new functionality, that new feature, that new extension of their offering isn't covered?
That's a tricky one, George. The answer, if you look at the HIPAA law, is it comes from as threats evolve.
Can you do us a favor? Once just close out of the session, come back in real quick. Let's see if your audio quality is better. I want to make sure people hear these. Just give us a second, everyone. I know I'm not the prettiest guy to look at, but just want to give Paul a chance to actually hear his answers, because some of this stuff is actually pretty good stuff.
How's the audio quality when my video is killed?
Right now, your audio quality is good.
I think it's probably I'm chomping down my upstream. My neighborhood, we have had some internet issues as everyone has worked from home suddenly, and at the same time, all our kids are watching Netflix. So I'm going to try to reconnect and see if this improves.
Sure.
All right, let's see how this goes.
All right. So let me restate the last.
Where did I lose you?
Go ahead and say a few words.
Where did I lose you?
All right. So the last question was, what happens when the platform that you have a BAA for decides to come out with quick, fast, dirty features like to, help the current situation, and now all of a sudden you think you're good, but in reality, it's a gray area.
So this is where ongoing risk assessments really become important. The law is not static. It changes as threats emerge, it changes with new legislation. And because the vendors that you're working with, to your point, add features and add different things that you can or cannot use in HIPAA compliant environments, it's on you it's on you as the provider to your clients to make sure you're reviewing this stuff at least annually. That's that risk assessment piece that comes in. So to be honest with you, it's the culture of clients that you have to maintain. It's an all the time thing. That's why people use services like ours, because it's our job to try to like keep our nose or ear to the ground rather, and know what's coming.
Sure. So in a very specific situation where you're in between those 1 year intervals and something bad happened, but you have a BAA, are you covered?
Good faith is what the law requires. So it goes beyond just having that BAA in place. Let's say you have the BAA in place, you've done your risk assessment as required under the law, your policies and procedures reflect what you're doing, and everybody in your organization is attested to those and understands them, then yes, this problem becomes your vendors. Because if you and I exchange business associate agreements, I can't indemnify you, you can't indemnify me. We're saying your problem is yours and mine is mine. So in that case, the vendor has kind of hung you out to dry.
Interesting. Well, I totally forgot to do this because we got kind of jumped right into it and I gave you a hot button question. But Paul, why don't you introduce yourself to the people that are watching, give them a little bit of your background and, how you got to what is now Compliancy Group.
Sure, absolutely. So again, my name is Paul Redding. I am the Vice President of Long Titles at Compliancy Group. I come out of the MSP background, so I still own a small portion of an MSP based here in Memphis. All we did was healthcare and like Department of Defense manufacturing. So compliance and those kind of services are really what we built our business around, and we were a Compliancy Group partner. I took over the channel in September of last year, kind of joined the dark side of the force over here with you vendors. And in that role, really what I do is, we talked about it, kind of the road warrior thing. I go out and work with partners and try to teach them how to monetize compliance as a solution and turn it into a business opportunity.
So that's really weird. You had medical on one side and defense contracting on the other. There's like a huge difference between those two worlds.
What's funny is actually they're pretty similar. Both are going to have regulatory compliance standards they have to follow. That's 70 or 80% policy and procedure and 20 or 30% IT. Neither one of them understands anything about that stuff at all. They're both under things like OSHA, ISO. All these standards really kind of fall into place. The irony is, to your point, I didn't recognize the similarity between them at all either. When it first happened, I came out of the manufacturing sector and thought that the only clients we had that looked like this were these factories. It was the Compliancy Group that showed me that no, regulatory law applies to all these business sets, and if you take what you learned here and apply it elsewhere, you can do well.
So are you allowed to share with us anything? What's the coolest thing that was being built by some of these manufacturers? I'm just curious.
Nuclear submarines. We have my former company, their largest client, I can't name the client, but they are on the East Coast, and they have a facility that they literally construct nuclear submarines under a roof. As a matter of fact, I can say this: the building that they use to do this is the elevator shaft from Die Hard. It's one of the single largest inside structures in North America, all under one roof with no supports around it. So when you see all these crazy like falling and long shot scenes in Die Hard, it was all shot inside this what's now a submarine factory on the East Coast.
Wow, it's pretty actually cool. I didn't expect that answer, but hey, I'm glad I asked now. All right, so let's zoom out. Right, you're in the MSP space. You still got a little bit of tie into the MSP. You've been through the trench. You understand the day-to-day pains. Like we didn't even really explain what a BAA was, right? I kind of asked you a couple questions, and like maybe there's people on the call that never even heard of it. I hope not, but maybe they have. So what is the if you have an MSP, or let's say whether it's a long-standing one, or let's say you're trying to get into the business, what are the first 2 or 3 things that should really be top of mind if you're talking about HIPAA compliance. And just to be clear, HIPAA compliance covers anyone who is in medical or services medical. Hopefully I said that right.
Pretty much knocked that one out, man. The way to explain the whole relationship between everybody without trying to teach everyone in the audience all about HIPAA, because regulatory law is about as much fun as like setting your face on fire, maybe putting it out with a fork. It's a miserable read, right? What you need to understand is there's 3 rules in HIPAA. One of them is privacy, how the doctors see their patients, okay? One of them is security rule. That's where we all get involved, IT stuff, nerd stuff, the physical part. The last one is called omnibus. I jokingly refer to it as on the bus. If your customer is on the bus, get on with them. Everybody involved in touching PHI, conceivably touching it, moving it, transporting it, storing it. And by the way, PHI is protected health information. It goes way beyond, I don't mean a birth date and a social security number. There's 18 identifiers that can make up PHI, and any of them in the right context can be private information. So to answer it, a business associate agreement, it's part of that omnibus rule. It changed in 2015, and by 17, it really got heavily enforced. What it says is, okay, you're a covered entity, you're a medical shop, but you have phone vendors like telehealth vendors like Zoom, a managed service provider doing all your IT stuff. All these people can conceivably touch your PHI, and you need to give them a contract that explains their responsibilities and makes them agree to take it. Because until I say, hey, George, BVoIP is recording my calls, and therefore some of these calls are going to have PHI on them, if I don't tell you that, you don't know, and it's not your responsibility to keep the healthcare information safe. If I tell you and you sign this thing that says, I'm cool with that, I'll take it, now it's your problem. And back to that earlier example, a breach on your side isn't going to affect me and I won't be fine. So people think the business associate agreement, like managed service providers, run around servicing clients, and because the customer never sends them one, they think, ooh, I'm protected from HIPAA. No. You're willingly working in an environment where you have no contract at all that defines anybody's risk. Everyone can be audited and everyone's at fault.
So you've been in this business now for a bit. Can you give us a couple of examples of MSPs who have actually been affected by this? I think people don't think that it's real, but until somebody they know gets it, I don't know why, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is actually happening, right? I mean, people that are in the sandbox are getting affected by this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So because I've not looked at your audience, I'm not going to call out the names of the particular MSPs. Yeah. I think it would be a little bit harsh to do, but I'll give you some specific examples.
Give us the
I'll give you some specific examples. I'll give you the name of the organization affected by the breach. So Cottage Health was affected by a breach where they were fined $3 million because they had a misconfigured server. The server that was misconfigured, and it sounds like an IT fine, right? It's not an IT fine. Problem is, Cottage Health used a managed service provider to perform as I understand, it was a migration. Somebody beat me up if I was wrong about the actual process being performed. But basically, server A would be easier to move the data to some other location if you just open it up to the internet instead of having to use all these wacky tools. So somebody on the MSP side goes in, they open the server up to the internet, they complete the task. The migration is done, they secure the new environment. They left all the ports open to the internet and that old server was still exposed. Somebody gets in, compromise the server, hundreds of thousands of medical records are stolen. The fine was levied not against the MSP because it wasn't their data. The fine was levied against Cottage Health, but you wonder why, right? But it's the MSP's mistake. No, Cottage Health as an organization has an obligation to assess the risk periodically and upon major change. They went through and moved, let's say it's an exchange migration from on-prem to 365, slightly major infrastructural shift, right? It was nobody's job to go back and make sure they locked the door on the way out of the house, right? So because the policies and procedures fell down, Cottage Health gets fined $3 million. Now, it's my understanding they're suing the MSP for 13. because they want the fine, they want their reputation back, and they want all the business that they're going to lose because this happened. The other one I'll give is a much less heavy-handed example. It's a couple $100,000. It was like $250,000 to an MSP right in your hometown in Philly. This MSP was fine because their technician lost his cell phone. Now, how does that end in $1 million fine, or a couple $100,000 fine? MSP tech is on site. He's wrapping up some kind of on-prem deployment. He's taking pictures, for the tickets. He captures some PHI in the background. Doctor's mistake, he has, say, a clipboard showing a bunch of medical records. Problem is that MSP didn't have a policy and procedure in place telling this guy, you don't take pictures like that in doctor's offices. You don't take pictures of the screen. You don't download data. I think he had downloaded a file or something to his phone to test this. You can't put that stuff on your phone. If they did have that policy in place, no big deal. The phone's encrypted, it's stolen, and no fine. It's not even really.
Uh-oh. Paul, I think I'm losing you again, buddy. I think the last thing I heard
lack of policies. Hey, we don't care the data.
All right. Yep. I think you finally caught on. Yeah. So the last thing I heard, Paul, as you're reconnecting was it's not even really a breach. And then we broke up there.
Yep. So it's not even really a breach. It's a lack of policy and procedure. It's an organizational failing.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. What is your recommendation then? Like to your point, right? Phones, mobile devices, USB sticks, like that's the stuff that people have a hard time dealing with. What's your recommendation for that category of equipment? It's the hardest thing to really handle, to be honest with you.
Agreed. And I'm going to leave my video off for a minute so we can hear my response. Agreed. It's a difficult thing. So first and foremost, you have to have a policy and procedure in place for it. So it kind of like, let's talk about what happened with COVID. Everybody suddenly allowed people to go home, work from environments that they weren't securing with their IT tools, use personal devices that they weren't in play before, like using your phone for your app, for your, using a phone, for example, to use your EHR. All these things change. Did you adopt a bring your own device policy? Because if not, you're legally obligated to do that. If you didn't tell the employee before they could do this, and you didn't have some kind of security policy around it, you have to do that. So let's start with that as, let's say the baseline is put your policies and procedures in place. Now, to removable media, I think this is not going to be a surprise to anybody in the IT security sector. In case of removable media, try not to use it. I mean, if you have to, encrypt it. If you have to, we also say it should be on inventory. So this isn't like somebody brought in a thumb drive from Walmart and plugs it in and uses it. It comes into the environment through corporate IT. It is secured, it is encrypted, and it is issued to a specific team member. If this thing is lost, they register it, they don't trade it with people. Treat it like keys, for example. Treat it like something that has an extreme risk associated. And then the last one is encrypt absolutely everything. If you think data can end up there, encrypt it. One of the biggest mistakes we see the MSP community make is to say, I don't work with PHI. I'll give you a perfect example. My MSP had this happen. Guy walks into my office in a complete panic. We just got a medical record. What do I do? Only reason he recognizes is because of his Hipaa training. How would we get this, right? Well, this doctor, bonehead that he might be, is working and his Outlook screws it up and he sees an error message. So smart doctor clicks and takes a screenshot and attaches that to a ticket and sends it in. Problem is, he doesn't realize that the screenshot he took has both monitors on it, and on the second monitor is a PDF open of everyone that they treated that day. Like 146 people's names, social security numbers, birth dates, treatment, everything. And he sent all that in my help desk system. So if the computer that my guy's not working from, or they're working from, is not encrypted, if the server that I was hosting, in our case it was automated on, was not encrypted, then what have I done? I've taken in PI and I've stored it in plain text format. It's a scary thought.
Interesting. Yeah. So I never even thought about assigning specific devices to people. Like cell phones obviously make a lot of sense, but USB drives and external disks and actually like assigning them and encrypting them per person. I'll be honest with you. I never even thought about those devices like that because they're so, throwawayable kind of thing.
That comes back to my experience working in the Department of Defense side. Even in HIPAA terms, these are relatively new things that we're, trying to explain to make them aware of. On the DoD side, like in DFARS world, it's been that way for years. Thumb drives are something everyone's just terrified of.
Talk to us about the wall of shame.
Wall of shame. So everybody can look it up. All you have to do is Google search HIPAA wall of shame. Please make sure you include the word HIPAA at the beginning of that. If you just search wall of shame, you will get something much less appropriate. The HIPAA wall of shame is a place where all breaches can be searchable. You can break it down per state, city, by specialty even. So you go to, and this is an article about it, they should have a link to it here, but you basically can go to this HIPAA wall of shame. There you go, that link right there. And you'll be able to search. And for example, you see how these are all just lots of states.
Yep.
If you are going into a Tennessee healthcare provider, you can filter it by Tennessee and show them people that they might know. If you want to go and find, a hacking incident specifically or an IT, then if you look over to the right, it tells you what happened to these people. And this can never be taken down. So one thing that's very important for everybody to understand, if you go on the wall of shame, you are here forever. And both businesses and patients that you are working with search for you to find out what's happened and who they should and should not work with.
So this is not just a marketing problem. This could be an insurance problem. This could be an existing customer problem. It doesn't help at all, right?
That is correct. And if you look, we're looking in just the last 12 months right there with you. And you see, it's funny. It's about half and half, right? Yes, there's a lot of, call it IT incidents, but there's a lot of unauthorized access and disclosure. A big part of the way that you operate, and back to kind of the theme today, talking about what changes when you send everybody home. In your office, you have these little silos. So nurses work here and doctors work here, and they have their own way of, keeping information safe. When everybody goes home, you can't just let all of a sudden all those rules go to the side. We have a real problem. Goes away, and all of a sudden everybody's on some big giant call discussing every patient case. Can't be that way. You got to keep all your things in place that you put in the office.
So worst case scenario, a breach happened, and that breach happened at an entity that is under, HIPAA. What should they do?
Well, it's not even what should they do. It's what do they have to do. Mm-hmm. So if you have a breach of more than 500 records, you have 30 days to report that. And your report has to include what happened, how many records were taken, how you believe they got in, and the action that you took to resolve it. So we call that a meaningful breach, anything over 500 records. All breaches, whether meaningful or minor, let's say under 500 records, you have till the end of the calendar year to report it. All breaches, whether minor or major, are all going to result in an investigation. So if you want to think about where fines come from, let's say, which is first, the chicken or the egg, what really happens is there's a breach or an incident, which is followed by an investigation. And that investigative arm we haven't discussed, it's the Office of Civil Rights that actually does the audits. So if Health and Human Services is the group that writes the law and decides if you get fined, ultimately your right to privacy is a human civil right. So if I lose your medical records, I violated your civil rights. So it's actually the Office of Civil Rights is required to come in and investigate. They turn in their report to HHS, who decides what to do to you. That's actually how.
Wait a minute, civil rights, like we're talking about the same guys that you hear on the TV now during the stuff that's happening currently, right? I feel like that's the same
absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. You have a civil right to privacy, and I violate that when I dump your information out there on the internet or give it to the hackers in the dark web and the script kiddies get you.
Interesting. So not only do you need to let HHS know, Health and Human Services, you also need to, follow the local breach notification laws, I'm assuming, at the state or local level.
In many cases, that's going to be where your pain begins the first time. When you report to HHS or OCR, and like any federal agency, there's a degree of kind of a slow ball starts rolling and then eventually rolls down the hill and tears you up. In state cases, breach notification laws mean you start paying for identity protection, notification fines, all that stuff day one. The states eat you alive as they charge you for every single person inside their state that you have to contact, tell what happened, and now pay for LifeLock, right? So that's usually the first check people end up writing is thousands and thousands and thousands of LifeLock subscriptions.
So how does this affect the business liability insurance, the business professional liability insurance, the general liability, like that whole cyber liability? This all plays into all of that now.
It does. And George, it's funny you touch on something there that I think is important, especially for the service provider community to understand. When we're talking about healthcare, remember that on the bus thing I was talking about. There's all these other businesses that are in healthcare that are not doctors or dentists or psychiatrists. So lawyers, insurance companies themselves, accountants, billing agencies, call centers, phone companies, all of these vendors fall under the HIPAA law because of the clients that they work with. And I'll tell you, the first place insurance really comes into bear is read the form that the cyber liability insurance company sends you. When you apply for that stuff and you're an attorney, one of the questions that they're going to ask you, and this is ubiquitous, it's absolutely across the board, they're going to say, do you comply with all federal and state laws and legislations around privacy, such as, and they specifically list HIPAA, CI, etc. When they are doing that and you say, yeah, I want my policy, and you just kind of like mark that thing off, you know what you've done, right? You've given them a way not to pay you when you try to cash in on this policy. Mm-hmm. There's nothing an insurance company likes better than $1 million, or $1 million request. And you turn this thing in, you put in this claim, and they go, now, George, I understand you got breached because some hacker in Lithuania got into your system. We would cover that, except you said you're HIPAA compliant. So I need to see your high-tech Subtitle D privacy audit from 2019. Can you provide that for me, please? The answer no immediately shows that you lied on your form. You therefore entered into this contract, like, what is it? You wrongly entered into the contract. They don't have to pay, and they won't. So one of the first places it really gets you is HIPAA gives them a way not to pay you. And by the way, there's no insurance policy in the world that can pay your HIPAA fines. They're not allowed to. So you can't take an insurance policy that says, don't worry, the federal government gave you a $3 million fine, we're going to get that, any more than you can take an insurance policy that says, go ahead, rob that bank, we'll pay your bail, get you out, and make sure you don't go to jail. It doesn't work.
So the fine is not insured.
The
work to clean up the technical issue may be, but the actual fine is not covered.
No, it's punitive based on your violation of a law. You're not allowed to do that in any instance.
Oh, I don't think a lot of people realize that, to be honest with you.
They think no. Most people actually think that cyber liability insurance is going to pay if they have a HIPAA violation. It would help you, for example, we were talking about the notification of the people in the state. That's a place that's going to help you out. But if you think that you got that Cottage Health turned to their insurance company and said, okay, we need $3 million for the government, then they're sadly mistaken. That's not going to happen.
That's a hard lesson to learn in the moment.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people forget that, or don't realize, and I know this is what you do, and I'm not trying to, this isn't a sales pitch. I just think it's more informational. There's like multiple pieces that need to be checked off. It's not just, hey, is your stuff encrypted, right? The paperwork part is like 90% of this thing, and there's like multiple categories that need to be covered. And really, if you're servicing people who are under HIPAA compliance, the umbrella, then there's parts they need to do, and then there's parts you need to do, right? So can you just give us a brief overview so everybody understands that it's not just one thing?
Yeah, George. Actually, what I'm going to do here, because I'm not going to, we've obviously established that I had some bandwidth issues. Can I share my screen just real briefly?
Yeah, let me, I'll stop sharing
Yeah,
mine.
I actually want to show you guys specifically what
Yep.
this.
Share when you're ready.
Nah, it tells me you've got it disabled.
Hold on 1 second. I can fix that.
Technically,
Yeah.
there we go.
There you go. Thank you, Sade.
All right, perfect. Okay, everybody sees this. So this is what HIPAA really looks like. It is 3 rules, and I'll back it up so you see the 3 rules. So basically, the privacy rule is, like I said, it's all that stack of paperwork. We see a doctor tells who they can tell what. Everybody kind of understands that. It applies to it's why you have to be seen in the quiet private room where other people can't hear and treat you, right? The security rule, it does include the IT portion. Okay, that's it right down there. But it also includes their physical site. There's an administrative and privacy audit, and then we have the omnibus rule. So to answer your question, if you talk about the IT portion of it as a whole, in HIPAA terms, it is 1/3 of one of the rules of HIPAA. So it is roughly between 20 and 30%. It's a big section of that rule. And there are, some of the omnibuses, it only has a couple of statutes therein. But if you technically take a look at this thing, I mean, IT literally makes up 1/3 of one of the HIPAA rules.
I don't think people realize that. It's like a
No,
very small component, really.
no, the failure rate under audit is 94%. So since the inception of the HIPAA rule, 94% of businesses that have been audited have failed and been fined. I am, you know me, I think you and I both lean towards being a little cynical.
Yep.
I am not so cynical as to believe that 9 out of 10 people are willingly negligent, like deliberately are violating this law. The reality is when you say HIPAA, people call their IT guy and they're like, I need a firewall and antivirus. Yeah, and backups and encryption, right? That's all critical. But that is 1/3 of one of the rules. If you are not doing all of this in its entirety, then all you are doing is setting yourself up for failure. There's a difference between compliance and security. Security is risk management. Compliance is adherence to a law. Very different things.
So obviously that you as the MSP servicing people who are covered by HIPAA umbrella, you need to do this yourself, right? And then your customer needs to do it themselves as well. So like, what does that really look like, right? There's all this documentation. I understand that you put the rules out here. What are the heavy lifting parts here that we're missing?
If you take a look at it, and this is like how HHS defines compliance, if you look at this, find me the IT. It's just not there. It's just not there. What they're really telling you is that you as an organization train effectively, document well, communicate internally effectively, enforce your guidelines that you put in place, and respond promptly when you see something go wrong. So what they're really saying is assess the risk of your business and make sure everybody does their job. It's a function of the organization to comply. It's a function of the IT tools to assist in that. So to us, IT is a symptom of a much larger business problem. So in reality, what it really takes to apply, and I'll go ahead, I want to jump way on ahead and I'll show you kind of what it takes. We believe that ultimately at the end of the day, and here you go, that's what it takes. Here's your heavy lifting, folks. If you can do everything on this page right here, and you guys can get a copy of this at the end, I'll share it with everybody, I'll send you a link, then you're fine. You're completely compliant. It's do all your audits, remediate everything that you find in your audits, put in all your breach notification, and put in the security measures that enforce this. Your policies call out, protect PHI. How are you doing it? I equate all this stuff to like showing your work in Algebra 2, right? The first time I took Algebra 2 was like the first class I ever failed in my life. My answers were right. I couldn't show my work. I skipped ahead too much. So compliance works exactly like that. As long as you'll do everything that a bunch of lawyers listed out and show your work, it's very simple. You don't have to be an IT engineer to comply.
Yeah, but these check boxes have large meanings behind them. Like, I don't know what Subtitle D privacy audit looks like. I'm sure I could Google it, but I'm sure it's not one page like this is.
No, and that's exactly the problem. If you take a look at this, and to answer your question, it takes an organizational shift. It takes being willing to, we call it trust but verify, right? So you have to look at everything within your organization, even the things that you think are right in the first place. Hey, look, I know my firewall's right. Okay, when's the last time you actually looked at the configuration, assessed what's happening? Okay, great. Now we move on to the next piece. So it's a series of assess and correct and document as you go. The reason there's so much weight behind these is because the law is written to apply to a single mental health professional and, like Baptist Memorial Hospitals, right? So there's a lot of room for interpretation here. And honestly, this is why we as an organization exist. It's not a sales pitch for us, but I'll tell you the reason that we as an organization are out there functioning is because trying to figure out what this means specifically for your organization, specifically in your case, is very confusing, and people need someone to guide them through it. That's kind of where we come from.
So Paul, if I get a certified letter in the mail from some government department saying that I need to have some sort of Hipaa audit, am I calling a lawyer or am I calling you? Like, I guess it depends.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. If you are our client and you have our seal of compliance, then you are calling us and we are preparing that audit for you. And I'll tell you, in a 94% failure rate in our 15-year history, no one who has our seal of compliance has ever failed an audit because we respond. However, I do need to tell everybody out there this: we do not do reactive response. If you just had a breach and they are auditing you, unfortunately, I need to recommend you call that lawyer, you call somebody else, because what we are doing is telling you this is how to do it right. This is the policies and procedures. We put it all in place for you. And once you live inside that system, then we can protect you. We can't save you if you're out there on your own today winging it.
So it's all about proactive. Reactive is a whole different story.
If you are going into your HIPAA audit purely reactively, you are going to be fined millions of dollars.
Oof.
I say it with complete confidence.
I'm having a hard time even swallowing that. Okay.
The average fine is 1.5.
Oh, 1.5. I have that sitting over here in the briefcase. Yep, ready to go.
Right? Yep, no problem.
So, how many, listen, you service, I mean, obviously your company services more than just the IT services industry, but obviously you focus here. How many of these audits have you been brought into since the company's been around?
I don't have an exact number. I'll tell you, I mean, on the upside, more than 50 without question. We're involved in 2 or 3 major audits at any given moment. So right now, I think we're involved in 3. And so it's an ongoing, constant thing. There may be more than that are still hanging. These things take years. It's a very slow burn. One of the audits that we were involved in is from a breach as far back as like 2015 or 16. These things, they come after you for a very long time. You're going to be defending yourself forever. There's a legal bleed and a cost associated with it. But I'd say our senior compliance officer, first of all, he was an auditor. So prior to being with Compliancy Group, I have no idea how many hundreds and hundreds of audits we've done. But out of our client base, I know that at any given moment, we've got 2 or 3 live.
Okay. So that's interesting. You said that somebody in your organization was on the other side of the table doing the audits against people from a government side?
So yeah, he actually started, originally he began as, you would actually bring him in to audit you as a hospital or a very large enterprise organization. So you'd set everything up and you would pay this guy to come out of the auditing space first. He came in as like a consultant. Our service was born out of the fact that he would come in, tell you everything that was wrong, tell you what you needed to do, and a year later he would come back and you hadn't done anything. Because it takes someone moving each piece of the organization through the process, holding people accountable, making things happen, and giving you a way to do it. If all I do is, hey, George, here's the answers to your 96 or 300 or however many questions we did, fix all this stuff, I'll be back. The odds that when I come back next year, everything here is fixed are almost non-existent. So the ongoing service you see today was a reaction to going in, auditing. I'll give you a client example. He audited LA County, 9 hospitals, 1,200 clinics. Okay, great. Here's your 10,000 problems. Next year, there's 15,000 because they didn't do anything last year, and then they've built more issues. So that's kind of the space we come out of.
I see. So just to be clear, this you can't just do it once and then you're good. This is like a renewal thing. You need to do it. You said every year.
HIPAA compliance is like a marathon with no finish line, and the only way to lose is to stop running. So as long as you can show my foot was there yesterday, it's here today, and it's going to be there tomorrow, and that pace is reasonable, you're doing the things that you're supposed to do, you're not actually expected to be 100% compliant. You can have a system that's out of config. You can have an issue that's taking place that you're resolving, but you have to have, in an ongoing fashion, be assessing your risk, training your employees, monitoring your policies and procedures, and implementing the security methods required. It is a never-ending thing. It's a culture of compliance.
I see. So can you give me an example of where somebody had something wrong and actually didn't get fined?
Yeah, I'll give you a really good one. We have a client. They are actually an MSP's client, so it's 2 steps. So we have the service provider, and then we have the client. It is a type of lab or a facility where they do medical testing, blood work, that kind of stuff. So my understanding is you generally show up here for something that's either you think you might have some kind of crazy cancer, or perhaps you might have a social something or other that you shouldn't have picked up, right? So a mother-in-law sees her son-in-law come into this facility. He ain't got cancer, so she calls her daughter and says, hey, Jim Bob over here is showing up getting tested for who knows what.
Oh,
Mary Sue back home freaks out, have whatever happens on the personal side go on. Long story short, in real terms, this person, the guy whose privacy is violated, reports all this to OCR and HHS, reports to the clinic for basically ratting him out. We were actually able to show, though, that the person who did this on January 10th at 10:15 a.m. read their privacy policy. She said she understood it, and then she legally attested to follow it. That organization, that very year, even though it was her 4th year working for him and she had done this every year, had reiterated to this person, you cannot do this. They threaten to fire you if you do it, and you said you understood everything that just came out of their mouth. In that situation, no fine, no corrective action to the clinic. She is civilly and legally responsible for what she did. So it's not that there wasn't a breach. It's that the clinic did everything they could. It's good faith effort. They can't make this person follow the law. It's a human choice.
very interesting. So this was a customer of the service provider. So you were really helping both companies. Was the MSP really even involved in that? Seems like a human being thing.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. Had nothing to do with them.
Cool.
Nothing to do
Very,
with them.
very intriguing.
But by the same token, if you think about it, the client, they look great to the client because they put something in place that protected them from millions of dollars worth of fine. And in our case, that MSP is the one that brought us into the table. They're like, look, these are third party. They'll help you in the case that something goes bad. Guess what? Bad things happen to good people every day.
Yep. No, that's very an interesting story. Wasn't expecting that. But it's something that probably happens more than we think about. It's just a factor of being a human being. Paul, how do people get a hold of you and get a copy of this checklist and anything else that you want to share?
Yep. So I will put this up right here. During the whole COVID crisis, we did write a new bring your own device policy and a telecommuter work from home policy. Like I said, even if the folks listening today are already our clients, if you have not gotten the new policies, your coach will be reaching out to you, but you can just download these. You guys can go in there and modify them. At least that will help your clients, adjust to having sent all these folks home. The HIPAA compliant checklist, that's that second link down there at the bottom. This is something that's a great conversation starter. If you have customers that think they're doing everything right, you don't really have to poke at them. You say, hey, what are you doing for your HIPAA compliance? They go, I thought you did that. No, I'm IT. Here, this is your list. If you would, check this thing off. And if you need help with it, we'll bring in experts to do it. And then you ask how to get a hold of me. That says info at, but we are not very creative here at Compliancy Group. We're compliance folks. So my email address is paul@compliancygroup.com. I think everybody can probably remember that one.
Fair enough. I appreciate you for coming on today. I'm curious to see how many people sent people home, didn't have this new adjusted policy. And I'm wondering how many people felt that they were okay from a HIPAA compliance standpoint because it was relaxed. And I'm also wondering how many people realize that there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it doesn't take much to get into a bad position.
Like I said, that number that I always come back to at the end is, well, 24% of people get it wrong every single day, over and over and over again. So I would say that the answer is the vast majority of people are screwing this stuff up.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. Just double checking to make sure there weren't any questions pending. Hold on 1 second. Here's a good question. Do you have a list of tools and vendors that you recommend for the IT part that you have listed somewhere you could share?
So we have a lot of the security backup telephony vendors that are our clients. We have that in a HIPAA Alliance marketplace. We work with vendors that have our seal of compliance, and we recommend those because I know what they do for HIPAA compliance. We're familiar with a lot of tools, but it's something of a closed ecosystem. So yes, we do, but it's something that as a partner, we kind of share with you and we walk you through that stuff. It's in our HIPAA Alliance marketplace.
Understand. And, I know this is public being shared. If they sign up with Compliancy Group for themselves and decide down the line to offer whatever your package is to their downstream end customer, they can do it piecemeal, or do they have to do it all at once?
We've got a bunch of different pricing mechanisms. We've got annual, monthly, reseller, direct, and referral. Because we come out of that direct space, we worked first with the medical providers, then with telephony providers and vendors, and really the channel is about 4 years that we've actually been in this sector. So yeah, we've got a plan for you. A lot of the smaller MSPs or folks that are making a transition from VAR to MSP or reseller to MSP, a lot of times what they do is they sign up with us to get HIPAA compliant, and they just get a referral agreement because we pay referrals for anybody that we bring on board.
Got it. So there's a lot of avenues depending on your situation, your size, your space. There's an option.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone for coming again. Today was Tuesday, not Thursday, but on Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time will be our next session of MSP Initiative. This session was recorded, so if you ever want to refer back to it, you'll find that at mspinitiative.com. And again, hope to see everyone Thursday at 1 o'clock. And Paul, I hope I'm going to see you for the end of the year, man.
I'm counting on it, George. If no, I don't see anybody else by the end of the year, you and my buddy Ryan, if we can't all get together and chat again, I'm going to lose my mind. So
sounds good.
Take care of yourself. Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
Have a great day.
Bye.